2:54 a.m. this morning, the 13th of October 2022, my mum died. She was born in the room above a barn in 1931 in the village of Offnham, named June after the month she was born in. My mum had a somewhat idyllic start to life in the town of Evesham, which is in the Midlands of England. Her grandfather worked on a farm, and when she was visiting him as a young girl, he would collect her from the bottom of the hill with the large plough horse, and she would ride on it up the hill to his house. And as a girl born in Offnham, she was allowed to dance around the maypole in the village, which is granted only to people born in the town, which, given there's no maternity hospital in Offnham, I guess is a claim few can still make. But Evesham isn't far outside Birmingham, a major industrial target in World War II, and she would tell us stories of lying awake in her bed as a young girl, looking out of her bedroom window across the river valley at the hills opposite, and seeing German bombers silhouetted, which had dropped bombs on the city and making their way along the river and onwards home. The village was the subject of some light bombing in the war, as planes would have to drop all of their bombs they had remaining after hitting their targets to conserve fuel for the journey home, and would bomb any target of opportunity. She used to tell a story of how one night there were two trains crossing in opposite directions on the two parallel railway bridges over the river. One train was containing munitions, the other was containing troops, and the sparks flying up their funnels attracted the attention of a German bomber. If the bomb struck either of the trains, there would be massive casualties, as the explosion of the munitions train would destroy both. But the bomb instead dropped between the two bridges, and the next morning the children of the village were dispatched to collect the masses of dead fish which had been blasted onto the riverbanks, a treat for them all. During one night she was kept awake by a baby crying, only to complain to her father the next morning about the baby through the wall next door, crying, only to be told that her mum had given birth, and she now had a brother, my Uncle Dennis. Her father was a grocer, too old for service in the war and in a reserve trade. He would distribute the rationed foods to distant farms around the village. He also occasionally received goods from the local American military base to distribute as well. And my mum told us stories of them receiving tins whose labels were lost to water damage. So it was a mystery as to what they were going to get when they opened each tin. Were they going to get a tin of meat, a tin of veg, a tin of peaches? They didn't know until they opened it, and had no idea what they were having for supper. She also told of one occasion when a crate of Mars bars were water damaged in the shipping, and the base asked my grandfather to dispose of them to the local pig farms to feed the pigs. But he discovered only the outer layer of the box was damaged, and the inner ones were absolutely fine, so he distributed them to the children of the village. After the war, she worked in a Woolworth store straight from school, and then she worked for a local newspaper before signing up with the Women's Royal Naval Service, commonly called the Wrens. As a Wren, she visited various parts of Europe in the years after the war, and described to me the devastation she witnessed, and also told me a tale of visiting the Eiffel Tower in Paris with a friend. They couldn't afford to go up the tower, so they sat in the sunny park beneath it, and they were flashed by a man. He came up in front of them with his long coat closed, opening it, revealing his naked body underneath, and her friend burst into laughter at the culprit, who ran away. In the Wrens, who at the time were not allowed at sea, she served in supply, distributing uniforms and equipment to sailors. And because she served on the same naval base as Prince Philip during his service, she was one of the few who could claim to have handled his underwear, something she told us with some amusement. It was also here she met my father, who came into the supplies to complain that his kit was wrong, calling her a stupid bloody woman, and returning later to ask her out on a date as a way of an apology, showing charm which I can only hope to have inherited. As a couple serving in the military, my parents moved around a lot, which led to both of my brothers, my sister and I, being born in different parts of the UK, even different countries within the UK. When I was young, my dad left us, and my mum went from being a full-time mum to having to work to support us. Amongst other places she worked for an organisation called Crossroads, which cared for pensioners, And that ended up coming full circle as Crossroads provided care to my mum during her later years. After my dad left, my mum's aim was for there always to be a safe place for her kids. She won the family home in the divorce settlement and kept it as somewhere we could all move back in if we messed up in life and needed somewhere safe to be. And it's something we all availed ourselves of at one point in our lives or other. In her later years, she began suffering from dementia, Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's. And her memory began suffering. It became a joke between us all that she would rarely get our names right on the first attempt. And she would act somehow like it was our fault for having the wrong name. Despite this confusion, she always knew one thing, that she loved us, and that we loved her. She might get names wrong, but she always asked after each of her grandchildren, who she adored. Dementia is a horrible illness, taking your loved one away from you in pieces. In her final couple of days in hospital, as the illnesses robbed her of her ability to speak, her final words to me were in response to me telling her that I loved her, with "you too." While it might seem greedy to want more days with someone who lived 91 years, in reality it just makes the absence I already feel equal in enormity to the time I had with her. I'm going to miss my mum. She always did us proud, and I hope we continue to make her proud.